messages that have the power to influence our thoughts.
The messaging was to create fear in the Iraqi troops. It worked.
New technologies that link directly into the human brain.
The question is, could you actually manipulate a person into doing something that they don't want to do?
And secret government facilities that some believe can control the minds of people all over the world.
Every brain on the planet linked in and then looked in. This is 1984 on steroids.
Over the past century, there have been clandestine programs implemented around the world designed to control the human mind. There are those who believe that what was initially meant for military use during times of war has now been used not only by governments, but also corporations to control us all. Through the computers we use, the televisions we watch, and the phones we carry wherever we go. Could it be true? Perhaps the answers can be found in America's book of secrets. Kuwait, February 24th, 1991. The United States launches a ground offensive known as Operation Desert Storm to liberate the nation of Kuwait from Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein and his formidable army, the Republican Guard. Hussein has taunted American leaders for months, boasting that the United States does not have the willpower to fight a protracted ground war. However, it is the Iraqis who quickly lose their will to fight. The conflict lasts only 4 days and results in the surrender of more than 60,000 Iraqi soldiers.
There were instances where there were hundreds surrendering to a couple of guys. I mean, it was that kind of a deal where they're just surrendering.
There was a mass surrender of the Iraqi forces. Was it because, shock and awe was destroying everything around them and they were running away to keep from getting killed? Or was it because of psychological warfare?
Before U.S. ground forces fired a single shot, the Army's 4th Psychological Operations Group launched an extensive campaign designed to manipulate the Iraqi soldiers occupying Kuwait and break their spirit. Putting into action the Psychological Operations Group's motto of Verbum Vincit, or the word will conquer. This tactical communications arm of the U.S. military airdropped 30 million leaflets containing messages that encouraged Iraqi troops to renounce Saddam Hussein and abandon their posts. The group also broadcast radio and television transmissions, conveying that Hussein was a ruthless dictator whose military would be swiftly annihilated by the U.S. and her allies.
The messaging was to create fear in the Iraqi troops. It worked. What a roadmap to success from a military perspective. I mean, how else did the 4th largest army in the world collapse so readily?
The U.S. military's application of conventional psychological warfare tactics to demoralize Iraqi soldiers is well documented. But there were also news reports of a secret technology that was used to influence the minds of the Iraqis in ways that they weren't even aware of.
Years later, the idea came out of the Gulf Wars, hey, let's do this even better. Can we disrupt a person's thinking without them knowing? Just disrupt it. Maybe even clandestinely give our signals messages the other guys can't hear. Can we do that? And what they did is they would embed a signal on the radio broadcast in the region. It was mainly just to push emotion, utilizing an electromagnetic signal piggybacked on a radio signal to create an environment of fear to degrade the adversary.
The electromagnetic signal reportedly contained messages that, although too subtle to be consciously noticed, nonetheless instilled strong feelings of hopelessness in the minds of the Iraqi soldiers. The concept may sound like something out of science fiction, but psychologists actually have a name for this kind of manipulative mind control. It's called subliminal messaging?
Subliminal messaging is any stimulus, any message that your brain picks up that you're not aware of. It happens because the message was fast. Anything faster than 50 milliseconds, you're not going to be consciously aware of, although your brain will pick it up.
The emotional parts of our brain react much faster than the logical problem-solving parts of our brain. And so that's how sometimes these subliminal messages can get to us and make us feel something, even though when we think about it later, logically, we don't realize how that could have happened.
Some experts believe that subliminal messaging is a powerful way to influence the human mind. And they claim that this mind control technique has been used to manipulate people around the world for decades. Spring 1957. Journalist Vance Packard publishes a book titled The Hidden Persuaders. In it, Packard writes about how companies are considering using sub-threshold advertising techniques to manipulate customers into buying their products. One proposed technique involves inserting an advertisement into a movie for only a split second, too short for the audience to recognize the ad consciously, but long enough for it to be absorbed subconsciously. Packard's book serves to educate the public on the idea of subliminal messaging. However, it also incites cynicism toward modern media and corporate advertisers.
People get really angry when they know they're being manipulated. The idea that in movie theaters, somebody might just slide an image in for just a second, to sell you more Coca-Cola and popcorn and so on. It made a lot of people angry in America and around the world.
There has been some proof in research that subliminal messages can have an impact on how you feel about a product. One really good example is when we zone out in front of the TV, we're trying to get into that rest and relaxation state. When that happens, your mind is not extremely focused on the information and processing it directly. The information is not being processed through your logical channels, but your brain doesn't have to logically think through something to have an emotion about it. That's when we're the most susceptible. But if you were kind of neutral, subliminal messages might get you to feel more positive about a brand or more positive about a product.
Commercials are there to incite into you the urge to go and get something, buy something, do something. Now, the question is, could you go deeper into that and actually manipulate a person into doing something that they don't want to do?
While subliminal messaging may have proven effective in convincing a soldier that a battle is hopeless, or persuade someone to make purchases they may have otherwise never considered, in recent years, an even more potent form of mind control has emerged: digital manipulation.
We check our smartphones about 100 times a day. And if you're 18 to 24, it's nearly twice as much. It is a whole new business model. Grab attention to sell a product. But what we're learning quickly is the experiences and knowledge provided end up driving behavior that you think was your own the whole time. There is a massive knowledge gap between what digital consumers know versus what the tech companies know. That is unhealthy.
Digital media dominates the world today. Nearly 5 billion people, more than half the world's population, are routinely connected to the internet. But what might happen if this technology that we rely on was used as a weapon against us? Many security experts say it's already happening. Coming up,
There are programs at DARPA to read and write to human brains. If we can send instructions and information or let another person control their actions, that could be malicious.
You weren't seeing what was really going on. Dit zijn de verborgen conflicten.
One of the largest genocides since the Second World War.
Their reaction is complete denial.
It was a front that allowed them to run covert operations.
Civilians didn't understand why this fight was taking place.
It will always be thought of some other international power.
Secret wars uncovered.
The bombs fell like rain.
Elke donderdag om 5:30 op History Channel.
Mis het niet. Een gloednieuw seizoen met een nieuwe presentator. Forged in Fire. Elke woensdag om 8:30 op History Channel.
Washington, D.C., April 21st, 2020. The U.S. Senate's Select Committee on Intelligence releases its final report concerning allegations of Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The report shows that, although the investigation uncovered no evidence of manipulated vote tallies, it did find evidence of a Russian disinformation campaign designed to spread misleading stories on social media in hopes of swaying public opinion.
The Russians specifically engage in creating fake accounts online to potentially show support or lack of support for one side or the other. They utilize fake imagery associated with fake news articles. For example, the Pope endorses Trump is one of the ones that was most widely circulated. It was attached to a fake news article that was written and had background designed to emulate a CNN article, and it was spread virally on the internet and promoted by Russian botnets, which are these large groups of fake accounts that are centrally controlled, and they operate under one single master.
Propaganda is not a new thing. Politicians would, twist the reality and select facts or maybe even tell outright lies to convince people to vote for them, support them, go and die somewhere in the front line for the cause. It's just that in the past, the tools available to politicians to spread those messages, at the beginning it was just word of mouth. Then it was printed press, then radio, then TV. But now you can communicate with millions or billions of people where you can essentially talk with those people virtually one-on-one.
Warfare really has become increasingly a battle for control of the mind. And if we can figure out how to manipulate these folks, then we can change people's perceptions about events that happen in the world and even their emotions, which the Russians have demonstrated the willingness to do.
The 2016 presidential election brought to the forefront foreign actor disinformation in democratic elections. It did not impact the overall result, but combating disinformation is going to call upon members of the government in addressing the scourge of disinformation and fake news.
Many experts agree that digital propaganda is an effective way to manipulate people's thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. But there are some who suggest that the most widespread form of internet mind control doesn't involve influencing voters, but rather influencing consumers.
I'm less concerned with Russian trolls. I'm much more concerned with the fact that platforms such as Facebook or Google are using algorithms to learn about what users like and what users prefer, and then one can leverage this information to make you buy something.
Internet algorithms have grown very sophisticated over the last 10 years. Their objective really is to keep you engaged on the platform.
Think about how everything competes, from the billboard to all the things popping up on your screen every day. It's about gaining your attention. Now, if you know enough about someone, then you make sure the images or the things that will draw them in become more and more refined.
We're leaving gigabytes of data, each one of us, every single day. And those algorithms can extract insights from this data that previously were only available to people that were closest to us.
And what's happening on the platform while you're engaged, they are learning based on your online activity. That's fed into databases that also identify your features, and then machine learning is utilized to discern, based on a certain feature set, what your likely preferences are, what your interests are, and then provide you with content based on that knowledge.
Based on 200 superficial Facebook likes An algorithm can predict a person's behavior, their psychological traits, their preferences, with higher accuracy than what can be achieved by a person's spouse. Now, this is mind-blowing.
This becomes very, very useful and very interesting to advertisers. So advertisers don't want to advertise to everybody equally. They want to have very personalized advertisements to very specific segments of their target market. And this gets more and more personalized the more information these advertisers have. It is not as simple as buyer and seller. This is you going to a mall and browsing while the mall charges brands to give them your behavior data. We all have different ways in which we're persuaded to adopt a given belief, persuaded to buy a product or a service. And so the more data that we give off in these platforms, the more sophisticated the model which is built of us, and the more specific these advertisers can get in terms of the specific techniques they use for persuasion.
The idea that tech companies are using algorithms to influence the behaviors of billions of people may sound like a far-fetched exaggeration. However, there is scientific evidence to suggest that the internet does in fact have an impact on how we think. According to a study published in the medical journal World Psychiatry in 2019, using the internet doesn't just captivate our attention, it may also rewire our brains.
Especially as we're spending more and more time on these devices, these technologies have a very unique impact on our brain's dopaminergic system. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter in the brain which allows us to experience a pleasurable response and also to predict pleasure in the future. In the digital world, the schedule of pleasure delivery tends to get us coming back again and again to these platforms. If we can agree with the definition of addiction being compulsive behavior, it is designing for compulsive behavior. We've reached a point with tech that you don't need a nicotine to drive compulsive behavior. Social media has figured that piece out.
Digital platforms and social media algorithms are revolutionizing the concepts of mass influence and persuasion. But is it possible to target an individual's mind, control it completely, and perhaps even weaponize it? There are those who believe it's not only possible, but that it's already happening. Coming up.
Sirhan was interviewed a lot about what he had done, and he says himself that he doesn't remember doing it at all. The police said that they thought that he was under mind control.
Well, I'm gonna go on an adventure today.
Okay.
That's right.
Done, and he says himself that he doesn't remember doing it at all.
There's descriptions that there was lights in the area surrounding where the shooting was, and there was mirrors, and that he looked in those mirrors and went in some sort of dazed trance state. That's been described by direct witnesses.
The police actually said that they thought that he was under mind control. He had a blank look on his face, and they thought that maybe he was not acting on his own. A lot of people talk about a mysterious woman in a polka dot dress who was with him the whole night, and this could have been his handler. Right before the shooting, apparently, he says that she pinched his shoulder, and this could have been like a trigger.
There's a couple of important facts about Sirhan. First of all, when he was in Palestine, he was exposed to a lot of war trauma, body parts on the street, and so on. And his mother described him having basically PTSD, going into trances, and so on. So he had the foundation, and he's clearly highly hypnotizable, and he, to the present, has amnesia for the shooting.
What do you remember about the shooting, if you're willing to talk about that?
Obviously I was there, but I don't remember the exact moment. I don't remember pulling my gun out of my body or wherever it was located, and I don't remember any human being. I don't remember any of that, Mr. President. And I've said that from the get-go, so it's not that I'm trying to evade.
No, I understand. Let me just ask you a question. When did you start remembering after the shooting? What was the first thought that you had?
Everything was always hazy in my head about that.
Taking together all the things that are peculiar about Sirhan's assassination of Bobby Kennedy, it seems that he could have been brainwashed into carrying out assassinations.
Is it possible that Sirhan was brainwashed to carry out a political assassination? If so, by whom? And is such manipulation of one's mind and body actually possible? Some researchers believe that not only can it be done, but that these types of experiments have already been conducted by the Central Intelligence Agency. In 1977, a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing revealed to the public that starting in 1953, the CIA ran a program that experimented with mind control techniques. It was called Project MK Ultra.
The CIA began their interest in mind control as a form of espionage at the end of the Korean War. And there was a lot of hysteria about the possibility of communists brainwashing American prisoners of war. And they decided that they needed to get on top of that and learn their own brainwashing techniques. They did all sorts of horrible experiments on unwitting subjects, people who were disposable, according to them, prisoners, drug addicts.
They would try all these different techniques, which included chemicals, LSD, electromagnetics, whatever anybody wanted to play with.
The goal was learning how the mind could be broken down, learning how it works, what the limits were in order to interrogate people and to force confessions out of them. They studied it for a couple decades, and the most ambitious goals for MK Ultra were finding drugs that they could use to create mind-controlled patsies who would kill someone and not remember any of it, like a Manchurian Candidate.
The term Manchurian Candidate was coined by a 1959 novel and a 1962 film of the same name. The story is a political thriller about a Korean War soldier who was brainwashed into being an unwitting assassin for a communist conspiracy.
A Manchurian Candidate is somebody with an artificially created multiple personality, where you can assign a mission to the personality in the background. The person out front doesn't know anything about it, and then if they're caught and interrogated, the person just has no information, no knowledge.
Although The Manchurian Candidate was a work of fiction, the idea of using brainwashed assassins in real life was proposed by George H. Estabrooks, a prominent psychologist who had ties to MK Ultra.
G.H. Estabrooks was a professor at Colgate College for many years, and he published books and he edited books about hypnosis, where he describes creating these super spies. He claims that he's run Manchurian Candidates, and he describes it in great detail. G.H. Estabrooks was never regarded as a fringe nutcase guy at all, so there's no reason to disbelieve him.
Estabrooks knew that 1 out of 5 people you could take into such a deep state of hypnosis, and working with them over 10 months or 12 months, you could create a alter personality, a totally new person. You could actually split them, deliberately split them, and they did this experimentally for 40 years.
On September 28th, 1994, the U.S. General Accounting Office reported that between 1940 and 1974, government agencies performed mind control experiments on hundreds of thousands of human subjects. But despite this disclosure, the full extent of the MK Ultra program is largely unknown, because in 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all documentation of the MK Ultra program to be destroyed.
Since the vast majority of MK Ultra documentation was destroyed, there's so much that we'll never know.
My opinion about whether the programs ended in 1972 is, if they did end, the CIA and the military would not be doing their job. purely from a defensive perspective, we've got to have some knowledge, expertise, technology for detecting these people who are coming at us, learning how to interrogate them, get through these barriers in their minds.
MK Ultra kept advancing behind the scenes in different ways. It could be far more advanced than it was in the 50s and 60s.
Are the secrets learned from the MK Ultra experiments really lost to the ages? Or are some of those tactics still being refined even today? There are those who insist the research is continuing, and that the next battle to master mind control is shaping up to be an all-out war. March 16th, 2018. The U.S. government's Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, commonly known as DARPA, announces a bold initiative to develop what they call next-generation non-surgical neurotechnology. It is designed to allow the human brain to directly interface with machines.
We know that DARPA is exploring human-machine interfaces that include direct connections between the brain and outside systems. That's been from the beginning of DARPA's information technology mission, and it continues to this day. DARPA has created some of the most influential technologies of all time, things that we use and take for granted every day, including the project that became the internet. They've created self-driving cars, stealth technology, GPS that fits in your pocket. That's DARPA's specialty, to imagine the future and create it.
A new technology that is actually very much on the verge of being a reality that is being fielded is we could have a sensor maybe on the surface of our head, or maybe implanted somewhere in our body, in our brain, or something that allows us to interact directly with our communications gear, our processing gear, our weapon systems, and so on. But now imagine we take that technology and we can control robots at a distance with it. Even fly drones. You put this sensor on and you think the right way, and you can increase the speed of the fan by thinking and controlling that thought with direct-to-mind or mind-machine interfacing. With that type of capability, you could control all sorts of buttons and mechanisms and equipment.
Mind-machine interfaces will have many applications in both civilian and military life. But there are those who believe that this same technology could also be used by DARPA as a new form of mind control. Like their counterparts at the CIA, DARPA-funded researchers have spent decades investigating how the human mind can be altered. In 1965, DARPA launched Project Pandora, which studied the possibility of using microwave radiation to control human behavior. The project reportedly ended in 1969, but DARPA's investigation of how machines can affect and possibly control the brain continues to this day.
There are explicit programs of DARPA to read and write to human brains, whether it's through direct implants within the brain or wearing some kind of cap. So these things are being worked on, and we know that.
So what's the next step? Maybe the next step is we can send instructions and information to an actual person from a distance with this kind of technology to let another person control their actions. But that could be something that could be malicious.
If there's some way to do it from a distance, a much greater distance than something that you can wear on your scalp, that would be the ultimate technological achievement that would fall into this realm of mind control and direct human-machine interface that DARPA may well want to keep secret.
In the near future, DARPA may possess the technology to remotely control the human mind. But as concerning as that may be, according to some scientists, a more permanent kind of mind control technology is looming, and it involves modifying the human brain by altering the human body's DNA.
The future of mind control, and the future being right now because these experiments are being done, is using gene editing tools. One of them would be CRISPR.
The way it works is take the CRISPR, which are these short alternating repeats of DNA. You put that together with an enzyme called Cas. And so you take the CRISPR that you want to use, and you put these pieces together that can be injected and insert this DNA to certain areas of the brain so that we can change brain cells and turn you into something you wouldn't otherwise be. So in this way, gene editing technologies like CRISPR really form a definite basis for future mind control.
These are things that DARPA has investigated. Every technology has the potential for good or evil, and who defines what's good and what's evil, and who uses it for what purpose? These are all questions that have been asked about everything from rockets to self-driving vehicles. We still don't have a good handle on the ethics of various technologies that we use. The technologists tend not to be so concerned with the ethics. That seems to be the domain of other people, policymakers, for example, academics, people like this. There needs to be a hand-in-hand interaction with people creating technology and those who are considering the ethics of that technology.
DARPA states that its enhanced neural therapies go beyond mere military applications and offer benefits in other fields such as psychology and medicine. But what about clandestine research programs of a similar nature in other countries? There are those who believe that America's foreign enemies are on the verge of deploying weapons that target and even damage the human brain. And personnel at U.S. embassies and consulates around the world say the attacks have already begun. Coming up,
there were reports about people having concussion-style symptoms, sometimes nausea, some disorientation.
It looked as if something had been beamed directly at their brain. In some way.
American intelligence agencies found medical evidence which proved that the diplomats suffered mild brain trauma, but were unable to determine exactly what was causing the injuries. Rumors began to circulate about whether the embassy employees were being attacked by an invisible weapon, specifically designed to harm their brains.
When you analyze the data, it seems like somehow or other the brain area was targeted or was only affected by whatever this phenomena is. And I doubt that this was a natural phenomena because it seemed to be too focused on people that were at an American embassy.
Diplomats in Cuba have stated that they were attacked by a sonic weapon. A sonic weapon produces a high-pitched sound that is debilitating and can potentially have negative health impacts, including certain brain-related fogginess, drowsiness, feeling debilitated or lethargic on individuals who have been exposed to this weapon. Sonic weapons are well known. They're utilized by multiple governments globally. What's being discussed is a new form of a sonic weapon that doesn't just have instantaneous impacts. It has more far-reaching, longer-term, deleterious impacts.
These weapons definitely exist, there's no question about that. And if they were used, clearly it wasn't by us, so it's an attack.
Were American diplomats the victims of a sound wave attack by an unknown adversary? It's a disturbing possibility. But what is perhaps even more concerning is that it may not have been the only such incident. On May 23, 2018, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo testified to a congressional panel that an American government employee working at the U.S. consulate located in Guangzhou, China, had experienced head trauma. Secretary Pompeo told Congress that the symptoms were entirely consistent with those experienced by the diplomats in Cuba.
It happened in Cuba. It's happened in China. People were exposed to something that caused similar traumatic injuries to their brain. But What that something is, we don't know, and to what purpose, we also don't know. The question is, has somebody got some sort of weapon system or broadcast system that is causing this type of trauma to the brain? I don't know, but that could be a step towards some sort of, at least, mind confusion, if not mind control.
Although there is no verification of the existence of this type of sonic weapon, this type of weapon could exist, and if it did exist, governments would have a strong reason to keep them secret and to utilize them in a covert manner.
A system like this, you could almost never find where it came from, because they turn on the transmitter, turn it off, and then it's affected your brain, and you may not have physiological effects for hours or days, and you may be completely away from wherever you were that you were exposed to this and not have any idea that that's where you were exposed. Now, it's possible that you could take this technology and then use that for mind control. If you could put sounds into someone's head that are not normally there, you could certainly get their attention or do something to manipulate their response.
Well, there's several types of effects of non-lethal weapons, some of which I've heard about but can't document. So most of the time you actually feel either you're getting really hot, you're getting a burning sensation, you're nauseous, you're dizzy, you can't focus, so you consciously know that. Some of the time though, it's called V2K, voice-to-skull communication, where apparently you can send an EEG-style signal to a person and actually make them hear certain words. And then the person would just think they're hearing a voice or they're going crazy, they wouldn't know what it was.
I think technology that is inherently covert is the future of warfare, in part because of the plausible deniability. You can use this weapon, you can negatively impact an adversary, and it is very difficult to attribute the use of that weapon to a specific foreign entity or foreign actor. Every country conceivably will become engaged in this type of development, if for no other reason than to develop effective defenses against it. It will be used in future conflicts. It will be used in both times of peace and in war.
Turning mind control into a weapon and targeting individuals may sound like something out of science fiction. But what if such technology exists and could be used to shape opinions and beliefs on a national or even global scale? There are some who believe it does, and is already being used on us. Douglas, Georgia, October 27th, 2016. 30-year-old Michael Mansell and 21-year-old James Dryden are arrested after being found with an arsenal of weapons and a detailed plan to attack HARP, the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program facility, located in Gacona, Alaska.
HARP is this array of very large antennas, and the idea with HARP is that you could project very long wavelength radio waves up into the upper atmosphere and bounce the signal off the ionosphere and get it on the other side of the Earth. And you could continually rebroadcast these signals all the way around the globe over the horizon. To my knowledge, it is simply an over-the-horizons communication concept.
While the official purpose of HARP would appear harmless, authorities determined that the motive behind Mr. Mansell and Mr. Dryden's planned attack was due to their belief that HARP is not merely a communications project, but rather an elaborate mind control program.
HARP showed up in a book years ago, and the book was Between Two Ages. It talks about Gordon J. MacDonald's theory that if you could ever electronically stroke the ionosphere just the right way, the ionosphere begins to vibrate, and it becomes a big broadcast antenna in the sky. It would return a signal to the Earth that would manipulate the behavior of the majority of the people in contact with that signal. Now you have something on a global scale in terms of mind control.
The U.S. government has strongly denied claims that HARP is an instrument of worldwide mind control. But according to some researchers, there is more than enough evidence to suggest that both world governments and powerful corporations have been developing tools to manipulate the thoughts of people across the globe. for decades. And they claim that these tools are becoming even more adept at controlling our minds.
Facebook, Google, all these companies are already collecting vast amounts of data on us. It wouldn't take much to collect it all into one system, and it wouldn't surprise me if such a system did exist through the big social media companies, for example, or the government.
Stop and think about it for just a second. Every brain on the planet linked in and then looked in. I mean, this is 1984 on steroids.
Right now, we don't own our own data. The lack of education on the public's part about what they are giving away, that's unhealthy.
The solution to this problem is in better informed societies, in better educated societies, in societies being able to communicate more freely, more freedom of discussion and not less.
When you think of mind control, the biggest lessons learned are take control of yourself and what you think and what you believe in.
Advances in technology and neuroscience mean that the ability to influence what people think and feel continues to be more and more effective. But is the ultimate agenda of those behind these developments designed to benefit the masses or to control them? The answers lie somewhere in America's book of secrets.